Welcome back to another episode of One-on-One Sports. Today we're going to be looking at the upcoming NBA playoffs and taking a look back at March Madness. And it all starts right now.
Welcome back to One-on-One Sports. I'm Jack Marcus, joined alongside Bryson Burns, and we're going to give you a bit of a recap on that March Madness tournament that finished a couple weeks ago, and it truly was madness, Bryson.
It was, and that UConn team, though, that won the national championship, they were extremely well put together. They won the tournament by a combined 140 points, the most in NCAA tournament history. They had a very, very balanced roster. All 5 of their starters contributed heavily to that offense and to that defense, and UConn just looked very, very strong. The only team that gave them any sort of difficulty in their tournament was Alabama. Pretty much everyone else, they were in charge for pretty much those entire games. And Dan Hurley, he put together a really, really good ball club this year. They were back-to-back national champions now, only the 3rd time that's happened in the last half century.
Yeah, shout out. One of those other teams to do it was the Duke Blue Devils back in the early 90s. But like you said, Dan Hurley, hell of a ball club these past couple years, lost their 3 best players to the draft, and kind of reloaded even better than they had before. Like you said, 14 straight games in the tournament, or 12 straight games, I should say, of 13-plus point victories. And like you said, Alabama was the only one who gave them a little bit of a run for their money. But you saw in those last couple rounds for UConn, they keep it close in the first half, especially against Illinois. 5-point game going into the half, but a 30-0 run through the end of the first half and 25-0 run to start the second half. It was just nobody could compete with them in the last 20 minutes.
And as I said earlier, they just had a lot of good ball players on their club. They didn't rely upon one player to make all their plays. They could really call upon any of their 5 stars to go ahead and make a play in a clutch situation. There's a reason why 4 out of the 5 all Final Four players were that UConn team, the only exception being Zach Edey for Purdue. And so UConn just looked exceptionally strong. You got to remember, this was a team where a couple years ago when Dan Hurley first got there, they were 16-17. They were kind of faulty there for a second, and then you got to go back all the way to 2020. After they lost to Villanova, during that post-game interview, Coach Hurley said, "You better get us now because we are coming." And they really started winning after that, to the point where they started getting back to March Madness, and then they started to win championships again. He came into that program when UConn was really on the rocks, trying to restore them to their former glory, and he very much succeeded.
Yeah, you brought up the only other player on that all Final Four first team being Zach Edey. Like you said, all 5 of those players were doing things, whereas that's why I think Purdue fell a little bit short in the end. If we move towards the rest of the Final Four teams, Purdue had Zach Edey, had Smith in there, was able to produce, but not at the level they wanted to. Coach Painter had a great season. Zach Edey gave him all the props. It took about till the Elite 8 that Zach Edey started talking about himself. He was one of those guys that I disliked him because we saw 10 minutes of him shooting free throws, it seemed like, but he was tall and he got in the paint and he would out-rebound you by himself half the time. And then he starts talking about with that Tennessee team, they overlooked him. And so that was his revenge story, beating Tennessee, headed to the Final Four. It was a good look for the Purdue. Almost any other season, right? Like, would be a national champion, but not against these Huskies.
No, yeah, I mean, UConn was just simply too good. But looking at Zach Edey, averaged 29.5 points per game in the tournament, also 12.6 rebounds per game, which are just insane stat lines. He put up 37 points in that national championship game, so people may forget, but he actually played extremely well in that game against UConn. It's just that Purdue just relied upon one player too much, and because of that, they really couldn't get that offense going as a whole. They only went 1 of 7 from beyond the arc in that national championship game, and that's a team that really kind of lives with the three-pointer a lot when it's not giving the ball to Zach Edey. And so Purdue, they looked good for the most part. You got to give them props for being able to turn around after last year's March Madness, after losing to FDU in the first round, that 16-1 upset. Almost did the exact same thing that Virginia did a couple years ago, where they lose to a 16 seed, then nearly come all the way back to win the national championship the next season. So overall, pretty decent performance there by Purdue, but just came up too short against UConn, which arguably one of the best basketball teams in college basketball history. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I got to say, I definitely was not expecting them to go that far. I thought they always choked, like we'd seen 13 seeds, 15 seed 2 years ago against Princeton, or St. Peter's, I should say, and then the 16 seed FDU, believe it, last year. But to bring it all the way back, like you said, to almost repeat Virginia's history after losing to the 16, but just fell a little bit short once again, like you said, to those Huskies, because nobody was beating them that day.
No, yeah, but just taking a look at the other Final Four teams that didn't make it to the national championship, Alabama, that's one of the best basketball offenses we have seen in college basketball history. I mean, they were consistently putting up bucket after bucket after bucket. Their first Final Four appearance in school history, scored over 100 points against a Charleston team that came into the tournament as kind of a dark horse to potentially get some upsets. Alabama has to be very proud of what they put together. It's just that, you know, things came up short in the end, but you still got some really good players there that put together some really good stat lines overall. Of course, you also had Aaron Estrada, the former Hofstra player, one of the best players that the CAA used to offer. He played extremely well during the tournament. He was second in their overall points on the season. And so Alabama, you still got to be impressed with what you got. It's just that when you rely so heavily on that offense, when it starts to go below par, then it's going to be really hard to catch back up.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said, that UConn defense is very good, so they were able to stand the test that was Alabama. But that first round matchup, everybody kept an eye on it, especially being a CAA school. I'm sure you did too, Bryson, with that Charleston-Bama matchup that was, I think, 96-92 in the end. We knew it was going to be shooting all the way around, and they, like you said, were just dominant on the offensive end, especially through the SEC, and was able to just produce that in that point. Especially we saw it in that UNC game. They were able to outmatch and outshoot RJ Davis, and with Armando Bacot was able to get those boards and everything, and it was very impressive to see that team go so far, take down the 1 and take down the 6 in Clemson to make it to the Final Four for the first time.
No, yeah, Mark Sears also averaging over 24 points per game during the tournament. They shot over 45% in nearly every game in the tournament as well, and those were big wins against both UNC and Clemson. And as we mentioned earlier, they were really the only team to give UConn a run for their money. But now going over to the last Final Four team, and arguably what was kind of America's darling a little bit in NC State. I mean, you had both DJ Burns and DJ Horn. And DJ Burns, the second he stepped on that court for the March Madness tournament, after having a great ACC tournaments performance, he basically captured America's attention. He played extremely well. Just really impressed by that NC State run. I knew I had them going to the Elite Eight in my own bracket. I thought that they had the momentum to go ahead and go far, but even I was surprised by how truly far they ultimately went.
Yeah, I got to say I was truly shocked and disappointed as a Duke fan. I got to say, losing to them twice, nothing changed in that situation, and seeing Duke in the Elite Eight was huge for them, especially how they played. They played basically the same recipe as they did in the ACC tournament, and Duke had nothing to say to them. And DJ Burns and DJ Horn, like you said, the DJs were all over the floor. I don't think I've heard so many broadcaster DJ puns ever in my life than I did in those last couple games. And it didn't seem like those first few rounds they were making very money. But once DJ Burns, like you said, America's darling, caught with his big old smile and his vending machines that he sells on the side, was huge down that stretch. Those 9 straight wins, I should say, to make it to that Final Four after ending the season with 4 straight losses.
And it's a bit ironic, too, because Burns, he actually averaged 16.2 points per game, but Horn actually did a little bit better, averaging just over 17 points per game, whereas Burns, he was kind of the hype guy. He did a lot. Horn was kind of the more steady figure that was ultimately able to lead the team as well, and they both complemented each other so well on the team. But now, going to our final topic, what were your big surprise teams and your biggest disappointments?
You know, more than even just a surprise team, just the tournament as a whole, we heard a lot of discourse in the media of there's not really any Cinderellas this tournament, or everything feels more even. Oakland obviously was that upset that you always see over that Kentucky team, just Golke shooting the lights out there. But for some reason, NC State didn't feel like a Cinderella, and that's to go back to our Final Four and even the Elite Eight. Every school except for Duke had at least one transfer in their starting 5, and so that's why the field this year, I think, felt a little bit more even, both with Burns and Horn with transfers coming in. But for my team's letdowns, it's got to be Auburn for me. Losing to Yale in the first round, I was really huge on them coming out of the SEC, out of a championship. I thought they could go far, even give UConn a run for their money in that tournament. They did get a little bit of a bad draw there with UConn being in that next round at the 4 seed, but they couldn't match those Ivy League winners in Yale.
Yeah, and that's kind of a tradition at this point, as a lot of those Ivy League champions ultimately have that first-round upset. Yale obviously wasn't able to do much with it afterwards, but still very, very impressive performance. I would still say the biggest surprise was NC State. Yes, we did know that they had the momentum. Yes, they won the ACC tournament, and we knew they would potentially get pretty far, but still to get as far as they ultimately did, and the only reason they ended up losing is just because they lost some steam, basically, against Purdue. I guess no pun intended there, but I still thought that, they wouldn't even get that far. And I was someone who was feeling pretty confident. I was kind of in the small minority of people who thought they would get to at least the Elite Eight. And even I was surprised by how far they got. But I would say Oakland also, that's just a big, big program win for them. The majority of people watching them probably didn't even know they were from Michigan. They probably thought it was Oakland, California. Absolutely. But what a big, big win to get them on the map. It felt like they couldn't miss a single shot from beyond the arc. But the biggest disappointment overall, I would have to say, is Kentucky. This is a team that has struggled to win tournament games. You had that St. Peter's loss a few years ago, and they just can't get past that second round, basically, post-COVID. And that's what we've seen so far. And, John Calipari, that's just a tough, tough way to end his otherwise great career there at Kentucky with that loss against Oakland. But there were signs of this earlier on in the season. You had that loss against UNC back in December. You had that loss against Texas A&M in the tournament where there were signs that, hey, this is a Kentucky team that, while good, they can struggle against some teams that they otherwise should beat. And that Oakland team, they just could not miss that night, and Kentucky could not guard the perimeter. And because of that, it was another postseason letdown for the Wildcats.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, that it was the experience versus the freshmanness that we talked about all the time for Kentucky coming into this tournament. And Golke, that senior, was able to shoot the lights out that night versus Dillingham and all those freshmen coming off the bench or in the starting five weren't able to produce and have that level of experience coming in. My letdown is also on the flip side of the surprise in a first-round matchup. The New Mexico Lobos, I was very high on as an 11 seed. If you had told me coming into the tournament that the 11 seeds would have been 3-1, and one of those wins the loss was gonna be New Mexico, I would not have believed you. And on that other side, it's a Clemson run, right? For the surprise, going back to the surprise team, that Clemson team was kind of a shoe into the tournament before conference play even started, which always feels weird to say. And they did about 500 in that ACC play during the season, and they were still locks to be in regardless of what happened in the conference tournament, which is why those big non-conference wins can sometimes mean a lot. But then they went on the run when everybody was counting them out to lose to New Mexico. I think I had New Mexico in my Sweet 16, if not Elite 8, and they just showed up. They were the 6th seed like they were supposed to be and beat the 11. And so that letdown team of those Lobos, I was really high on them, and I thought they could have gone far.
No, yeah, I actually had New Mexico going pretty far themselves. I was just kind of very confident in what the Mountain West would do. Just looking at what they did in the regular season, they kind of got a lot of those like 11, 10, 9 seeds pretty much. And they ultimately got a lot of tournament bids, and they weren't able to make much out of them. San Diego State went decently far, but outside of that, that was really it. And so, that's certainly going to hurt them in the next few years, that if they come up into another situation where they could have a lot of potential teams right on the bubble, that the committee may not be as forgiving or as willing to let them in, just seeing what happened this year. But there were still some at least decent performances by those Mountain West schools, at least in the first round.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, as a whole with the committee, this year felt a little bit of an off year for them. Some teams that they let in at the bubble weren't really expected to, with that Virginia getting the play-in or Colorado State, Virginia scoring, I think, 44 points in their play-in game, and then Colorado State upping them by scoring 41 in their first-round matches against Texas. There were some bubble teams that they felt like they shouldn't have left out.
And I'm going to go a little bit off the script here, and this is kind of going back to what the committee originally said, but them not allowing Indiana State in. They had the net ranking of 29. They had one of the most exciting players in the entire country, pretty much, and they get to their conference championship, they lose. And, one loss is one loss. And if you're going to get a net ranking of 29, you're going to win these non-conference games, go almost perfect in conference, then really what's even the point? We nearly had this exact same scenario last season with Charleston, because the question was, Charleston was like 30-4 around there going into the conference championship game, and they were going, okay, if UNCW beats them in the conference tournament, would they let Charleston in as a large seed? And it was kind of a little bit of a coin toss, but slightly more predictors said that Charleston would be left out if they lost that game. Ultimately, we wouldn't know what happened, but this year it was an example of what would have happened in that, Indiana State kind of got the short end of the stick. And after the performance Virginia put up against Colorado State, which, just to be blunt, is probably the worst performance by an ACC team in tournament history. I mean, I feel like at that point, if you're Indiana State, you're the NIT runner-up. I mean, along with Seton Hall, which was another team that, even though they're not one of those small basketball schools, should arguably still have gotten in over Virginia and maybe a few of those other bubble teams. But there were definitely some teams that were pretty close. You also had schools like Oklahoma. Pitt was one where people were saying they should get in. Even St. John's was kind of on the outside looking in for some people. And so I think it was a very interesting selection by the committee. Wouldn't change much. I think Indiana State would have had a decent shot of going to the Sweet 16, but I feel like a lot of those small schools kind of run out of steam as you get deeper into the tournament. But it was, even though there wasn't as many huge upsets like the 16 over the 1s or the 15 over the 2s, it was still a lot of fun basketball that was certainly played. Yeah,
sometimes it feels like the best team doesn't always win, which makes March Madness so much fun. It's who gets hot at the right time. This year, it definitely was the best team winning with the UConn Huskies, and we got to give our props up to Danny Hurley there and all the boys at UConn. A huge, huge win to go back-to-back this year.
Absolutely. I mean, they were the best team going into the tournament, and they really left no doubts about it. I mean, they pretty much smoked everyone they play, and the only team that was with them was Alabama, really, with around 10 minutes left in the game, UConn completely shut down that Alabama offense, which is hard for anyone to do for 10 straight minutes, pretty much. But just very, very impressive performance there.
Well, we will be right back for one last segment at the end of the day. Thank you for joining us here for March Madness.
Welcome back to the BAM. As the NBA season is winding down, we're going to take you through our picks for who's going to go far in the NBA playoffs. And hopefully this bracket is better than my college basketball. No. Got it. How was the intro?
Are you going to throw it to me then?
After you do it? Okay. Ah, okay.
That's important.
Yes. Got it. Welcome back to the BAM. I'm Nick Charicello, and this is Ethan Potosh. And as the NBA season is winding down, we're going to take you through who we think is going to be raising the trophy at the end of the NBA playoffs. Hopefully this bracket is better than my college basketball one. Over to you.
Yeah, so behind us we have the current bracket as of Thursday night. So how this is going to work, because it could be a little bit confusing just to the naked eye. So Nick's picks are going to be on the top, and my picks are going to be on the bottom. The higher seed is on the left, the lower seed is on the right, and the 7 and 8 seeds are the play-in teams that we just think are going to end up coming out of the play-in bracket. All right, now that we are through that, Nick, do you want to start off?
Okay, so we're starting in the upper right corner with the Celtics versus the Heat. Now, the Celtics did lose to the Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, but I do think the Celtics are going to be able to move on. And also, we both agree that the Heat are coming out of the play-in and the Sixers. We both agreed on these play-in spots because the Hawks and Bulls absolutely should not be in the playoffs, and they are probably going home very quickly after they make it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on the Celtics. There's not much disagreement there. And as for the Orlando-Cleveland matchup, I'm going with the young upstart Orlando Magic, who, I mean, this is a super low-scoring series. You have two teams that aren't known for their offense. Two top 10 defensive teams. Cleveland is 7th in opponent points per game. Orlando is 3rd. And I'm just going to go with the young, upstart, exciting Orlando team led by Paolo Banchero, the least talked about first overall pick. Probably the last 10 years, maybe. No one talks about him.
I would love to pick Cleveland. Like, they're fun. They haven't really been good without LeBron. But you all heard the song. I got to go with Orlando Magic. Oh, we both agree with the same thing here. They're young. They're hungry. The Cavs haven't looked great since trading for Donovan Mitchell. They're just kind of there. Like, it isn't working. And I think after Cleveland loses to the Magic in probably about 5 games, we see Donovan Mitchell packing his bags either somewhere else in the East or out West. So now we're going to move on to the series down here with the Bucks and the Sixers. And my pick is the Bucks. The Sixers have been playing great without Joel Embiid, And the Bucks have not looked good. But Giannis and Dame versus Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey has been great in the playoffs, but you're having an Embiid who's a week off of an injury and isn't really known for doing well in the playoffs against two great playoff performers in Giannis and Dame. I'm going Bucks all the way.
Yeah, I'm agreeing. I'm taking the Bucks too. I do think this could be a competitive series because you do have, obviously like you said, Giannis and Dame versus Embiid and Maxey, but I think once in the end, the Bucks are just going to be too much for a 76ers team that has lost in the second round 3 years in a row. They can't get over the hump, and they don't seem as strong as they've been in years past. And the Knicks-Pacers series, very interesting series here. Give me the surprising New York Knicks, who have had a bit of a dream season. I mean, Brunson is balling right now. I think Kendrick Perkins just called him the best point guard in the league. I don't know about
Bold.
But he did just have 60 points a week ago. So, yeah, I mean, the Knicks are just playing great. The only thing was, is Tibbs going to run them into the ground?
Probably. We got D-Rose 2.0 here. 3.0, 4.0. How many guys does Tibbs run into the ground?
A lot.
And I'd say, honestly, this series says more about the Pacers than the Knicks. If you told me in the All-Star break this series, I'd be like, I could see the Pacers winning because Tyrese Halliburton was out of his mind, the second coming of Chris Paul, and now he just doesn't look like that. And the Knicks, they're hot. They are really hot. They have the fifth best record in the league since the trade deadline, trailing the Nuggets, the Thunder, the Timberwolves, and the Celtics. They've looked really good. So I can actually see them going very far. The only problem is most of their starters are playing 48 minutes a game because Tibbs really just can't keep their foot off the gas.
He doesn't like resting players.
So I also have to go with the New York Knicks. So now we come into the championship series, and you got Young and Hungry versus the Celtics. I'm taking the Celtics. There's absolutely no way I see the Celtics losing to the Magic. They're young, but that also means they don't really have playoff experience, and the Celtics have so much playoff experience. Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, they've all been in the playoffs for countless years. I just cannot see them losing to a young, inexperienced team in the Magic. There's only so many years you can choke. So I got to go with the Celtics and playing them.
Before we get Nick's jumping the gun a bit.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah. But I'm also taking the Celtics. They're too much for the Magic. It was a good run. It really was. Magic kind of surprised a lot of people this year. Celtics are just too much. They're 2 years removed from the finals. Last year they were in the Eastern Conference Finals. They're just way too much. But now, I've thought about this a lot. Knicks, Bucks. Until literally 3 days ago, I said the Bucks. But now, I'm taking the Knicks. Why? Because Doc Rivers has no ability to take any responsibility for anything. They had a really bad loss to the Wizards a few nights ago. It might have even been last night. I can't remember for sure. But he came out and he blamed the travel staff. He's like, the equipment managers weren't good enough, or the other staffers, I don't know what their exact jobs are. Like, dude, take some accountability. He also hasn't gotten past the second round in so long. Like we said earlier, Sixers, 3 straight second-round exits. He couldn't get to a Western Conference Finals with the Lob City Clippers, which is ridiculous. The Grizzlies got to one in 2013. The Blazers got to one in 2019. He couldn't get the Lob City Clippers to a Western Conference Finals. Are you serious?
I mean, we do have a marquee matchup if it was 2012 between these two coaches. But just saying that, you have Dame, you have Giannis. They could both take over at any point during a game. But I got to go with the way hot Knicks. I can't. They've just been so good since trading for OG Anunoby, and they've just been so well constructed when they really shouldn't be. And Julius Randle hasn't been the Julius Randle we saw in 2021.
He's been hurt recently, hasn't he?
Kind of. Even not hurt, he's just not been there. But if he can pick it up a little bit in the playoffs, next to Brunson and OG, you have a solid squad. And I think they could make a run because, you're playing the Pacers, who, Tyrese Halliburton hasn't looked good. I forgot that Pascal Siakam's on that team. And then you have this dysfunctional as hell Bucks. I just think they have a kind of easy schedule going into the playoffs, through the playoffs. And same with the Celtics. They're going to cruise through, and I think they're going to continue to cruise through the Knicks because the only problem when you're upsetting teams left and right, it goes back to Tibbs' coaching philosophy. They're going to get tired.
They're going to get so tired.
Because you're playing two one not great team, and even if they don't look great, the Bucks are dangerous. They still have 2 great people, and you're going to have to stop them. I don't think you were going to be able to run with the Celtics after running through all of that.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I think only 2 players this year in the NBA have played all 48 minutes of the game, and they're both Knicks in the past 2 weeks. So for that reason, I'm also taking the Celtics, mainly because I think the Knicks, somewhat of a Cinderella run, is going to fizzle out. I mean, these 2 cities are going to be on fire during this series.
Oh, 100%. New York, Boston, great rivalry there. But yeah, no, I agree with you. That carriage is turning back to the pumpkin on midnight.
And now we're going over to the West. So we have the defending champion Nuggets, who they're just too much for the Lakers. They swept them in the Western Conference Final last year. I believe all 4 games were close, but LeBron's a year older. AD has surprisingly stayed healthy, but Denver's just too much for him. So I don't see a way that the Lakers can take him.
I also have to agree. The Nuggets are just the Nuggets. Like, Jokic has been so good this year, and the Lakers have the worst net rating of any playoff team besides the Hawks. Shout out Caitlin Strickland. And I just can't see the Lakers beating the Nuggets in any world. And we also, we both have the Lakers coming out of the play-in. I don't see the Warriors making it out. And I'll get to that later. But first, I have to say, you know what team I think? I think Luka's finally getting his magic against the Clippers. He's getting his get-back game. His first 2 times he ever made the playoffs, he lost to the Clippers in 6, and he lost to the Clippers in 7. And this time, he has help. He has a Kyrie Irving he was missing. This is no more Kristaps Porzingis and pre-breakout Jalen Brunson. This is Kyrie Irving and Dwight Powell. He is going for it. He is the 2nd most points per game of any player all time, just behind Michael Jordan. He is a great playoff performer. I cannot see him losing to the Clippers.
Yeah, so this is our first disagreement because I'm taking the Clippers. They're too balanced. I think Kawhi, PG, I mean, this defense, they can do it all. They have the star power, they have the balance, they have the defense. And the Magic, they really don't have the defense. I mean, who's Kyrie going to guard? I mean, Kyrie can't play defense to save his life. We all know this. Like, Luka's not an amazing defender either. We know he can score at will, but who's Luka going to guard? He has to guard either PG or Kawhi, and I just don't see you can do that. The only thing is, obviously, Kawhi has injury history.
You say they don't have it. The Mavs have the #1 defense over the past 10 games. It's those guys in the back that are really coming up.
So maybe Jason Kidd has got him figured it out, but I don't think they have the personnel to deal with the Clippers.
You don't need a personnel. You just have Luka. Because you know who's guarding Luka?
Who's guarding Luka?
Westbrook. Westbrook stopped caring about...
Kawhi's guarding Luka. Or Paul George. Those are 2 all defensive players. Like,
I'm just saying.
6'7", I believe. I think they're both 6'7". Paul George might be 6'9", guarding Luka, who's 6'5", I believe.
I think Luka's 6'7".
6'7", whatever. Like, they have the size and the defensive prowess to handle Luka. The problem might be Kyrie. I don't know who's going to guard Kyrie, but I think they can handle Luka.
They couldn't handle second-year Luka. I don't think they can handle MVP Luka.
Well, they clearly did because they beat him.
Not by much.
Okay. Anyway, we're moving on here to the 2. So you see here we have a disagreement in the play, and I have Phoenix and he has the Kings. But I don't think we're going to have much of a disagreement here. Minnesota's just been incredible this year. #1 defensive team in the league. A pretty good big 3, and I think you can take it from here.
The only thing I have to say about the Kings and Suns, the Suns, they have KD, they have Devin Booker.
They have no bench.
They don't. They don't have a bench. They have a third player, but Bradley Beal's been awful. Not awful, but just not Bradley Beal this year. So I just think the Kings are going to beat them because they don't really, like, their biggest guy that, like, is going to make an impact is KD, and he's not guarding Sabonis. So I just think Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox are going to carry the Knicks to, or not the Knicks, the Kings to lose in the
sorry franchise.
The first round, yep. So I'm going to go with the Kings, not the Kings, the Thunder in the next series because that one's out of the way. Timberwolves win, and we're moving on to the Thunder, and the Thunder are just so well constructed. And now we are doing this 2 games ahead of.
Yeah, so some of these teams could change.
So actually, the Thunder, Wolves, and Nuggets all have a shot at the 1 seed, and that just shows, despite how close the whole league has been this year, these 4 teams are who you're looking at. They are the championship potential.
You're talking
teams.
Denver, OKC, Minnesota, Boston?
Yeah. Boston, Denver, Minnesota, OKC. And saying that, I'm taking OKC to come over the Pelicans because I don't think the Pelicans have a shot at all.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I took OKC as well. The fruits of the tank are finally back. You know the most insane thing is they still have like 3 first-round picks from the Paul George trade that they haven't even used yet.
Yeah, no, they have like 16 in the next 5 years. It's insane. They're going to run the league. But, so now we're getting to the fun parts.
So I believe here we're going with, I believe we have a disagreement here. Well, okay, we're going with the Nuggets first. So, yeah, I took the Nuggets because I think you're going to take the Nuggets too because they're the Nuggets. Not much needs to be said here. Defending champions, Jokic, Murray, MPJ. The possession ends here. MPJ has been passing the ball a bit this year.
I mean, I'm sorry. He'll never get over Michael. You better get my rebound, Porter Jr. But like the Mavs they don't have size. Like
no,
nobody's guarding Jokic.
Nobody's guarding Jokic. He put up like 40. I think the last time they played.
No matter which team comes out, the Nuggets are winning. But we do have a disagreement because I'm taking the Thunder because I just love how they match up against the Timberwolves. Because Rudy Gobert, he might win his 4th DPOY. He shouldn't. He absolutely shouldn't. Because
worst contract in the league, maybe.
I wouldn't go that far because look at the impact he's had on the Timberwolves. But have you seen the way guys will go at him, but not Wemby? Like Wemby should be the DPOY, but I'm gonna have to go with the Thunder just because I don't think Rudy Gobert can guard Shea. Because his problem is
like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yes, because.
I don't think he's going to be. I mean, you have a 7-footer guard. I don't think he's going to be guarding 6'3", 6'4".
That's almost it. His problem is that when guards go at him or take threes, he has no impact. His only impact is rim protection. So, if you face a team with a good guard, he's probably going to lose. Which they have a very good guard.
They do a very good guard. Is he the scoring leader right now, or second to Luka?
I think so. I think he's right there. But we're going to move on to what do you think?
Yeah, I took Minnesota. So the theme of my playoffs is defense. Like I said, Timberwolves, #1 defensive team in the entire league. Gobert, obviously, you just talked about him. Cat is having an amazing year. Anthony Edwards is having a real, he was good before, but he's really having that stud breakout year. I know Caden Strickland talked about him. Shout out Caden Strickland a couple weeks ago. Talked about him, Atlanta native. But yeah, Minnesota, defense. And it's going to take him past OKC.
Not against the #1 offense. I don't know. I cannot see them winning.
So you have OKC in Denver. I have Minnesota in Denver, and we're going with the Cinderella still. Maybe not Cinderella.
They're the 2 seed.
Minnesota. I mean, they don't feel like a 2 seed. Because they've just been bad for the last 20 years. They don't feel like a 2 seed. They feel like a Cinderella. But yeah, defense, and they actually can match up with Jokic because they have Cat and Gobert, so they can put multiple. They can kind of rotate around a bit. They don't have to have one guy guarding them the whole time. They can kind of have guys fresh.
Yeah. I wouldn't say Cat's known for his defense, but
he has the size to guard Jokic.
Yeah, that only gets you so far in the NBA. But I'm actually going to take the Thunder over the Nuggets. So we both have the Nuggets losing in the conference finals.
Yeah, we do.
So I think Chet guards Jokic perfectly, and I really think that they had a good run last year. I think we finally found a team that could beat them.
Nuggets have played a lot of basketball recently. They might be tired.
They have, yeah. No, going back to that tired argument. So now we have the matchup here, and I have to say, I think the Celtics go all the way. I just don't see them choking again. They have such an easy – if they don't lose to Jimmy Butler, and they only did because Tatum got hurt in Game 7,
and Jaylen Brown couldn't go left.
Well, yeah, that too. But now they have Drew Holiday. They have Porzingis. Yeah. They have people that can perform. So I just cannot see them losing. It is the Celtics' year. Go Boston. I have them. I think they match up.
Are you a Knicks fan?
No, I'm not a fan of any team. They match up perfectly. Drew Holiday versus Shea, Chet versus Porzingis, and then Tatum versus Jalen Williams. I just think the Celtics outclass the Thunder. Baby Thunder, again, Baby Thunder 2.0, but I just can't see the Celtics losing.
So I took Minnesota. Why? Because I don't think that Boston's going to be able to score. I think, there's 2 ways you can win a basketball. Well, obviously, you score more points than the other team, but the Timberwolves play, let's allow less points. They play the defense first, obviously. My theme of the playoffs, defense, defense, defense. Boston's not going to score. Minnesota's probably going to win games by scoring less than 100 points, maybe 100 exactly.
I think your argument's great in the early 2000s, but we're in the 2020s. Like, it's scoring. And Boston just has so many scores. Because Timberwolves have great defense, but what happens when the Celtics offense is overwhelming the defense? Like, who's your scorers? Anthony Edwards and Cat. Jason Tatum.
Yeah, I'm not saying the Celtics don't have good
Drew
scores,
Holiday,
but I'm saying they have better defense.
I'm just saying they have better scores, and we're in a scoring era. I got to go Celtics 100%. I think the T-Wolves are going to go home disappointed. Detroit and Minnesota, they both had Cinderella stories.
Detroit?
In football.
Oh.
It's the year of the Cinderella story, but they're going to be disappointed. And now we're going to go over to college basketball, where we're going to discuss the NCAA tournament and all the March Madness.
Thank you for watching today's episode on 101 Sports. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Instagram. Until next time, whose side are you on?
And fade down. Bah.
Yeah.
Okay, great.